Following the ouster of President Omar al-Bashir, the people of Sudan look forward to a new future. Ivanka Trump announces a $2 million commitment from the United States Agency for International Development and private companies for women in Ivory Coast's cocoa industry. And why are measles cases on the rise around the globe? Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Sudan is facing numerous challenges in the wake of the military ouster of longtime President Omar al-Bashir, both in its governance as a society. Protesters continue to demand a swift transition to a civilian government after decades of military rule. That very demand raises the questions of how those shaping Sudan's future will avoid past mistakes, a question that is at the center of this week's Plugged In with Greta Van Susteren. His viewer is Robert Raphael with more.
Protesters in the streets of Sudan may have been overjoyed, but the civilian government they are demanding is not in the immediate future. Ousted Sudanese leader Omar al-Bashir faces indictment by the International Criminal Court, charged with directing a genocide against civilians in Sudan's Darfur region. The man who now heads Sudan's interim military council, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah Burhan, has pledged to having a complete civilian government. Foreign policy analyst Kelsey Lilly says any transition to a civilian government will require strong diplomacy by the United States and others.
The Sudanese want the state-sponsored terrorism designation lifted, and that's because not only it has the security element to it, it suggests that they aren't sponsoring terrorism anymore, but it also unlocks really desperately needed debt relief. And so that will be something that is on the table when this new government is constituted, and the U.S. will continue some of its engagement.
Many of the Sudanese who were instrumental in the protests in Sudan were women. One who became an iconic figure is Alaa Salah, a 22-year-old engineering and architecture student. She became an internet sensation when a photo of her atop a car surrounded by protesters went viral. Salah received death threats and hate mail for her role in the uprising, yet remained defiant. The role of women in the protests is an encouraging sign, says Dr. Sarah Abdel-Jalil, who heads the Sudan Doctors Union in Britain.
I think women came across very strong because there has been a lot of suppression and they have been sort of hidden away intentionally. It's very I think, positive to see that the 30 years have not destroyed the Sudanese women power and ability to fight.
On April 16, Sudan's military transferred Bashir to a prison in Khartoum, where he is reportedly being held in solitary confinement. Robert Raphael, VOA News, Washington.
Well, for more on the role women and social media played in the oust of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, I'm joined by VOA's Ayan Biar, co-host of the popular women's television talk show, Our Voices. Ayan, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, first, in Sudan, being a very Islamic country, most people don't expect women to come out so strongly and be involved in such public action. How can we explain this?
Well, I think that in order to explain this, you have to look at how the economy in Sudan has impacted the women there. Part of the reason why protesters took to the streets is because the bread prices were too high. And we've heard from many parents, many mothers who have said that they could not feed their children because they could not afford bread. So I think that women showed up because the economy impacted them first and foremost. But also, if you look at the laws in Sudan, they are very restrictive towards women. There's public order laws that control how a woman dresses, how a woman speaks, who she associates with. And the UN tells us that 1 out of 3 women are married before the age of 18, and 9 out of 10 have undergone female genital mutilation. And if you remember last year, the case of Noura Hussein, she was sentenced to death in Sudan because she murdered her husband who was trying to rape her. That case was overturned eventually, but I spoke to countless protesters here in D.C. who said there are many women like Noura. And so what we saw during these protests is women coming together and trying to correct the laws of the past to make sure that the new Sudan does not repeat those same mistakes.
Yes, definitely. Omar al-Bashir and the other men there will now have more respect for women in Sudan. But how did the women use social media to organize so effectively?
Well, you know what? I always say that if women were the engine of this revolution, the oil of the revolution that kept the engine going was social media. Social media was really used to disseminate information. And if you think about it, Sudan's press freedoms are very restrictive, and the media is controlled by the state. So journalists, people had no way of getting factual information. And in fact, Reporters Without Borders just released an index that has Sudan at 175 at 180 countries. So the country is really not free. But social media was first and foremost used to disseminate information.
Now, we saw that the security forces that were associated with Omar al-Bashir were so ruthless. I mean, they beat up people, they killed people, but the protesters maintained calm. They were still peacefully protesting.
And that was actually by design. I've spoken to a lot of people who have said that in WhatsApp groups, they told protesters to remain calm. And one of the ways that they did that was they tried to combat fake news via WhatsApp group. I spoke to one person who said that government supporters would try to disseminate fake news and get protesters upset. But WhatsApp in particular was used as a way to keep protesters calm and to tell them to remain calm, because if they were violent, the Sudanese government would then have a reason to come after them.
Exactly, and we see in other cities, most times in other countries, people now react and they start breaking things up, they start being extremely violent. Now, this social media worked so well, but we know that actually social media has been very restricted in Sudan. So how did they go about it?
It has. Well, they have gone through via VPN connections. And so I'm not a technology reporter, so I don't know exactly how it works, but I do know that they were able to circumvent the restrictions through the VPN connection.
Yeah, but in a few seconds left, do we hope, though, to see a woman in positions of leadership now that, and I'm not saying you know much, but from what you've seen, is there any evidence that they might be involved in the new administration?
Well, from what I have seen through these protests that started in December, women have proven that they can lead. And I think that women have really earned their respect, not just in Sudan, but around the globe. So who knows, maybe that will happen, but that really remains to be seen. As I understand, they're still trying to figure out what the government is going to look like right now.
You know what? Women are just tough. They're just strong. Look at you. You know?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ayan, thank you very much. That's Ayan Bior. She is a co-host of VOA's women's television talk show, Our Voices. Now, the United Nations top diplomat in Libya, Hassan Salame, is condemning the fighting in Tripoli, which is being described as the most intense since the forces of General Khalifa Haftar began their fight to take control of the city earlier this month. UN spokesman Stephanie Dujarric told reporters in New York that at least 5 civilians were reportedly killed and several others injured.
The UN support mission in Libya condemns the increased use of heavy weapons and indiscriminate shelling that has damaged civilian houses, schools, and infrastructure. The Secretary General's Special Representative, Ghassan Salame, continues his outreach to call for a humanitarian truce to allow for emergency services to access civilians trapped in conflict-impacted areas.
The UN Security Council is considering a draft resolution this week calling for an immediate de-escalation and ceasefire. Libya has been in political and economic chaos since former dictator Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed in 2011. Still on the continent, Ivanka Trump was in Ivory Coast Wednesday as part of a tour of the African continent to promote a U.S. initiative to encourage women employment in developing countries. Trump met with female cocoa farmers at an agricultural cooperative before speaking at a summit in the capital. VOA's Isha Sarai reports.
Ivanka Trump traveled to Adzope in the Ivory Coast Wednesday, announcing a $2 million commitment from USAID and private companies to women in the cocoa industry. One example is Kayat, a woman-run agricultural cooperative.
Imagine how how many will benefit if we have 300 more associations such as this.
It's women in programs like Kayat that are part of the WGDP, a new Trump administration initiative to foster women's employment in developing countries, aims to help.
Obviously, she was very warmly received, and I think we all see that the women in the industry are super excited about the investment that the U.S. government is making, and they've stepped up to make their investment as well.
We're ready to work with them. We really want our families to be free and for our children to go to school like they should. We want to be happy like other women.
More women than men aspire to be entrepreneurs across the African continent, according to the World Bank. They face barriers, including lack of access to capital and often an inability to own land.
As women, we feared to go to take loans, which for a long time we know that has been available. But the fear of the consequences, what if the business fails, has been one of the reasons why we will be more tread carefully.
Trump also visited the WeFi, the Women's Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative Summit. Founding groups, including the African Development Bank, welcomed Ivanka and members of U.S. Congress.
Societies that empower women to succeed are more peaceful and more prosperous. And this is evident in all the research that we see.
It's definitely helping to attract a lot of attention and increase the visibility on the issues we all really care about, which is really women's access to finance, women entrepreneurship, how to ensure that women fully participate in private sector growth and realize their potentials.
Many entrepreneurs say increased support will help them succeed.
I believe that there is a strong, how can I say that, a will to help women in their own businesses. I believe that this is the most important thing. We need to focus on that.
Regardless of how much money or where it's coming from, some Ivory Coast women left Wednesday's summit feeling inspired about the future of African businesswomen. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Abidjan.
Well, in Abidjan, Ivanka Trump discussed her new initiative and in an interview with the Associated Press, saying ending discrimination against African women are also issues of African law.
Our actions are speaking for themselves in terms of our dedication to seeing Africa prosper. And I'm very excited about continuing my work to specifically focus on advocating and advancing the role of women on this continent and beyond. Well, I think rigorous follow-up, well-informed metrics, accountability, these are the things we need to demand across all U.S. government programs, particularly as it relates to development assistance. So we were meticulous in the design of this initiative. It was informed by hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders, whether it be bipartisan members of Congress, NGOs, agency heads who had led similar efforts, so we could think about what were the three pillars that would impact the goal most effectively of empowering women in the developing world, and what were metrics of accountability we could attach to ensure that the end result was delivered. But it's not going to be easy, for sure, and especially when you get to the third pillar, which is encouraging governments to change laws that either actively discriminate against 50% of their population or create cultural normalcy to discrimination, which has oftentimes been long held. So sometimes the laws are fine, but the laws on the books aren't implemented, especially when you get outside of the cities and into the more rural communities.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, examining the reasons for the uptick in worldwide measles cases. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines.
Nigeria shares objectives of the Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to develop economic partnership and build a community of shared interest.
Well, this is the initiative that has brought us all together.
U.S. President Donald Trump said Thursday it was having a good day. That's following the release of the Mueller report, adding it's called no collusion, no obstruction. The special counsel Robert Mueller's report on his investigation into Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. election was released to the public shortly after Attorney General William Barr declared Thursday it exonerates President Donald Trump of colluding with Moscow, and said that later, after assuming power, Trump had no corrupt intent to obstruct the probe.
As the special counsel report makes clear, the Russian government sought to interfere in our election process. But thanks to the special counsel's thorough investigation, we now know that the Russian operatives who perpetrated these schemes did not have the cooperation of President Trump or the Trump campaign, or the knowing assistance of any other American for that matter. That is something that all Americans can and should be grateful to have confirmed.
Well, moments after Barr finished speaking, House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler called for Mueller to testify before his panel no later than May the 23rd. Stay tuned as VOA continues to cover the story in the coming days. Now, U.S. authorities have charged 53 medical professionals, including 31 doctors, for their roles in illegally prescribing opioids and other dangerous drugs, sometimes in exchange for sex. Making the announcement in the state of Ohio Wednesday, federal officials said their work is not finished. VOA's Laditza Hoke reports.
American physicians, pharmacists, and other medical professionals have been accused of illegally prescribing millions of pills containing opioids and other harmful drugs. Authorities have identified 350,000 illicit prescriptions distributing 32 million pills.
Today's announcement involves alleged crimes against 53 medical professionals, including 31 physicians, 7 pharmacists, 9 physician's assistants or nurse practitioners, and 6 other healthcare professionals. This takedown is the largest of its kind against DEA-registered prescribers.
Those charged were not immediately named, but officials said arrests were being made and search warrants were carried out, even as they were announcing the charges Wednesday.
If so-called medical professionals behave like drug dealers, the Department of Justice is going to treat them like drug dealers.
Almost all of the illegal prescriptions for drugs such as fentanyl and oxycodone were issued in 5 states: Alabama, Kentucky, Ohio, Tennessee, and West Virginia. The most egregious cases include a doctor in Dayton, Ohio, who allegedly dispensed 1.75 million pills in a 2-year period, and another in Alabama who allegedly recruited women to have sex and allowed them to use drugs in his home.
Opioid misuse and abuse is an insidious epidemic, created in large part by the overprescribing of potent opioids nationwide. And unfortunately, Appalachia is at the center. The epidemic has resulted in a new generation of people suffering from the disease of addiction, and DEA has been a part of these frontline efforts in playing a central role. We're using all available means, administrative, civil, and criminal, to ensure that our 1.8 million registrants comply with the law.
More than 42,000 Americans died of an opioid overdose in 2016, and the numbers are growing. U.S. President Donald Trump has called the opioid crisis a public health emergency, and in 2018 unveiled his Stop Opioid Abuse initiative to confront the driving forces behind the crisis. Measures include education on the danger of opioids, cutting down domestic and international supply chains of illegal drugs, and helping addicts to recover. Zlarica Hoke, VOA News, Washington.
Well, it's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu with details on how some patients are regaining confidence after losing limbs. Lino.
That's right, Vincent. A physical rehabilitation center in South Sudan is helping some patients who have lost limbs regain some confidence. The rehabilitation center in Juba is run by the International Committee of the Red Cross. It serves both as a prosthetics factory and a hospital for patients coming from across the country to be fitted with new limbs. Observers say South Sudan's 5-year civil war has left possibly tens of thousands of people without limbs. Approximately 60% of the patients who come to the Juba Center have gunshot-related injuries and disabilities, according to the ICRC. They say some have become disabled by conditions such as polio and rickets linked to malnutrition, and many limbs are amputated for no other reason than lack of treatment.
I was going out of my house on a rainy day to go to the field. I got bitten by a snake. I was taken home. There was no car to transport me to the hospital.
Our role is to have the prosthesis provided and tell that this is part and parcel of you. It's going to be part of you. It's going to let you walk and get you back to do your business as usual.
It helps me go to school.
Now to Kenya, where a Nairobi hospital staffer has died and 7 others have been admitted following a cholera outbreak at the premier health facility in the Kenyan capital. Cholera, which is spread by ingesting fecal matter, causes acute watery diarrhea and can kill within hours if not treated. Mohamed Dagan, the executive in charge of health services in Nairobi County government, says there were 23 cases of cholera admitted at the hospital. Health officials say all precautionary measures have been put in place in the hospital, which has some of the most advanced facilities in the city. Now, the island nation of Madagascar continues to battle the worst measles epidemic in its history. More than 1,200 people have died since the highly contagious virus was first detected last September, mostly children under age 15. The World Health Organization says Madagascar had not reported a measles outbreak in the past 10 years, and the current epidemic underscores the necessity of vigilance. The nation's Ministry of Health, with the support of partners including the WHO, Gavi, the Measles and Rubella Initiative, and UNICEF, have initiated a 3-part vaccination campaign to ultimately target all 7 million children in the country, ages 6 months to 9 years old. The World Health Organization says measles cases are up 300% worldwide. The number of measles cases in the United States has soared to more than 460, the highest since 1991, and Africa has seen a 700% increase in measles cases. In today's Ask the Expert segment, we spoke with Rebecca Martin, director of the Center for Global Health at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and asked her, given the global increase of measles cases, what went wrong?
We are seeing measles and the increase in measles because of the failure to vaccinate. And I think this is a critical point to note, that wherever we see there is not a vaccinated population, measles will find people to infect and to cause measles disease. I spent 4 years in East Africa, in Kenya, and worked on measles strategies for the 8 countries in East Africa. And in that time, we were conducting immunization campaigns, we implemented surveillance and the laboratory components, and we saw measles go away to very low levels. In Kenya, I remember visiting the National Hospital, and the measles ward was closed. There were no measles cases. But since that, and over time, we've seen those measles beds fill up again. And it's because you can't, this is not a one-time effort as well. You must sustain immunization programs over time and continue to vaccinate as new children are born, that we have to make sure every child is vaccinated against measles. And if we don't, this is the kind of situation that we will see. The value of vaccines is that they save lives and protect children from dying. Vaccines are a cost-effective way for public health interventions to make sure people don't get sick and people don't die from diseases, so children can grow and have very productive lives.
And that was Rebecca Martin, Director of the Center for Global Health at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, speaking with us about the importance of vaccines in the prevention of measles. If you have a medical question that you would like to have answered, tweet me at Lenore Moudou, and we'll have a medical expert respond to your query. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter, as I mentioned, at Lenore Moudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, Lenore, thank you very much for that very useful information. Be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health reports every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. And now here's what's trending. This is no ordinary game park where Africa's Big Five can be viewed. In response to a huge spike in rhino poaching, the Connected Conservation Pilot Project, backed by technology firms, Cisco and Dimension Data, implemented a security blanket, CCTV and long-range thermal cameras, sensors, and a Wi-Fi network across the 62,000-hectare reserve along the border of the world-famous Kruger National Park, are all relatively new measures taken in an effort to reduce illicit activity. Now, the pilot project launched in 2016, and poaching in the Connected Conservation Operation area dropped by 96% that year. According to the African Rhino Conservation Collaboration, rhino poaching in South Africa between 2007 and 2015 rose 9,000%. Insane. Well, next up, here we go. With these words, Robert lets a researcher at the University of Washington know that he is about to be fed. The robotic arm has a pincer hand that can pick up a fork that has been equipped with a pressure sensor to prevent injury. A camera mounted on the robotic arm uses computer vision and machine learning to recognize the pieces of fruit and follow verbal commands from the user. The camera learns to recognize the user's eyes, nose, and most importantly, their mouth. It can adapt its movements even when the person moves. The research team hopes to teach the robotic arm to pick up smaller pieces of food soon. Well, and finally, US-based robotics company Boston Dynamics teased the commercial launch of its four-legged robotic Sport Mini with a video showing a group of them pulling a truck. The company has gained popularity on YouTube over the past few years, with videos showing its robots walking up hills, upstairs, and opening doors. Now, the company has its origins in the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where it developed its first robots which move like animals. The Sport Mini weighs 25 to 30 kilos, is electric-powered, and can operate for 90 minutes. It is fitted with multi-purpose arm used for picking up and handling objects. It also has multiple sensors that survey the world around it and keep it stable. And that's what is trending today. And that's our show. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.